When I started the Garage Doctor, I did struggle because I didn't understand my value. And not just my value as a garage door guy, but my value as a human being. I actually look forward to failing because I feel like failure is the first step to success. If we wake up tomorrow, we owe it to ourselves and everybody around us to have the best day we can, and also serve others to have the best day they can have.
Hello and welcome to the Superhuman Entrepreneur Podcast. I am here with one of my new great friends that I have, a superhuman entrepreneur himself, Trapper Searles. So we're going to definitely dive in and talk a lot about really what it is about being a superhuman entrepreneur and why that's so important. So Trapper, thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm super pumped just to be a part of this. And like I was telling you earlier, it's my first podcast, so excited to be along for the journey.
All right. Well, we'll make it as easy as possible for you. So starting off, we have a tough question. What do you love about being an entrepreneur?
I think the thing that I love the most about being an entrepreneur is providing service to others. And I think within the businesses that I've had and currently have, and then the businesses that I am moving forward to having, providing service and serving others is really amazing. And it provides a sense of fulfillment that I just think is rewarding on a whole different level. So that would be my best answer. There's a lot of things, but I think providing service to others is great.
I do. I love that. I think that's one of my definitions of an entrepreneur is someone who serves others and providing value. And then as we do that, sometimes we end up making financial benefit. Sometimes it's more of a spiritual, mental, emotional benefit that we get from them. But I love that there. And that definitely fits with what an entrepreneur is. So Trapper, I want you to share with us kind of just what has your entrepreneur journey been? I know there's been some ups and downs like all entrepreneurs, but kind of where'd you start from, to get to where you are now? And then where are you going in the future?
Yeah, totally. No, I'm happy to share. It's one thing that I think it's my superpower, just being really vulnerable and open to character building and character assessment. And so, my journey started a long time ago. I'm 41 years old. I would say about 10 years old, I started my entrepreneurial journey, although I probably didn't know it at the time. From Casper, Wyoming, I started shoveling snow in the winters because I knew that I needed to save money. If there was anything that I was going to purchase for myself, I would have to earn it. And so my background, from a much lower income family. And so it was kind of like just fend for yourself and earn what you can. And so started doing that. By the time I was 13 years old, I actually had three little kids that worked for me. And so I would generally get like $20 to $30 a walk and driveway. And then I would divvy that up, $5 to $10 a walk driveway with them. And so, on a good Saturday, it would probably do like $1,200 in shoveling sidewalks while everybody else was sledding or, having snowball fights. I was grinding, walking down the streets and just helping a bunch of neighbors. And then when I turned 22 years old, I actually started a company called The Garage Doctor. It's a garage door service business. I'd been in the industry since I was 15. I was working for a big company in Denver, and the quality of service wasn't kind of up to par with what I wanted to be a part of, because I've always felt that the service industry, home service industries isn't just about, I don't think it's about this at all, selling a customer something you want to sell them. I've always believed it was providing service and serving them to the best of their needs and what they want. And so when I discovered that there was a lack of that in the Denver market, and there was this huge company I was working for, I just felt like I could do it better. September 1st of 2005, I started the Garage Doctor, full service garage door company. And the original intent was just to be of service to others, provide service to them with what they were needing with their garage door space. I didn't really think in the moment that it was going to be some big business with multiple employees, et cetera. But now we're on our 19th year. We're the highest rated garage door company in the Denver market, which is super cool. We have a great team, and it's led us to opportunities that will be exciting to share in the future. There's things that are happening that are super exciting. And along that road, I started real estate investments for holds for not technically affordable housing, but I wanted to buy homes and then provide those to people who wanted to take care of a home if they couldn't afford to buy a home. So I have really great renters, tenants that almost occupy these spaces as if it was their home. And then it's a more reasonable rent because it's not focused off of just making money. It's about serving the community, which is cool. And then I just started writing a book I told you about 4 months ago. And so that's super exciting. I just dove into, signed up for my international coaching license. So I start coaching accreditation on the 8th this coming weekend. And so I'm going to get corporate coaching certified, life coaching certified. I just really am passionate about serving people. And you mentioned about entrepreneurship and service of others there's a fulfillment I feel that isn't about making money. However, when you provide service and you're serving others, I do believe that when you are taking care of people, it in turn does take care of you. And so that's something I've never questioned. It's just, if we can provide service to people, then there's going to be a return of value there.
Yeah, I do think, we already talked about that service aspect. I think you said the word serve or service, probably 10 times in that little couple minutes there. And doing that is definitely how, I feel like a big part of the fulfillment for entrepreneurs as they go and do. Because yeah, it's great having a whole bunch of money in the bank, but that doesn't fill your heart. And those things, that's so important with kind of what that purpose of who you are.
Absolutely.
And then you tied it right back into that next point, which I think is a really hard skill for some people to learn. Some people are lucky to have it, like it sounds like you did. But people, sometimes they have trouble charging what they're worth and realizing that value of what they're providing, whether it's even just, doing a garage door better than anyone else in Denver. You provide that value that comes from that. And, there's no reason why we shouldn't be rewarded from that. Just like I hope to, with the clients I work, help to provide value to help them level up their energy and their focus in their life and their longevity. And there's immense value to all those things. And so I think, did you ever run into any trouble along that for you? And whether it was, setting your prices or setting your structure for how you work with things to kind of overcome that? Or is that just something you were just naturally born with?
No, definitely. When I was young shoveling sidewalks, I kind of knew the value, right? It was, it was pretty simple, $10 a walk, 20 for a walk and driveway. It was kind of the industry standard, so to speak. When I started the Garage Doctor, I did struggle because I didn't understand my value, and not just my value as a garage door guy, but my value as a human being. And so I think that I didn't fully learn my value until just a few years ago, to be honest. But in the business, the service business, I look back and I remember doing so many projects for free even because I felt bad for the consumer or I wanted to help them. And then eventually it started to come at the cost of my financial wellness. And so then it hit a point where I was like, I have to start charging something, and then finding out, hey, how much is this really worth? What is the value I'm providing? And just like you just mentioned, in my space that I'm an expert in, anyone can learn how to fix a garage door. Honestly, I could teach anybody how to do it, but that's not the value you're providing to the customer. Are you providing great energy? Are you providing a relationship that they want to have with a service person? Do they feel comfortable with you? Are you clean cut? Do you look professional? Do you have all of the credentials of a respectable, reputable business? And so when I started to learn those things and I started to see the other people in my industry going to people's homes, I understood that I created more value than the other, the competition, so to speak. And so probably by the year 2 or 3, I really had a good grip on what our value was. And then also kind of like our mission was different than anybody else in town. So I knew that we could do all of the same things as anyone else. How could we do it better? And that was relationship building, answering our phone, being honest. So many service-based businesses feed customers and consumers kind of a line of nonsense. Right. And it's okay to say, hey, Mrs. Smith, you have a really unique problem here. I need to call in some help. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if you're not an expert in your field, they feel like they have to give a consumer an answer. And so they'll just make one up. And that's, in my opinion, one of the worst things you can do. Yeah,
it definitely leads to you getting stuck and further down the road as you do that. So, but
totally.
Okay. So kind of tell me, being ranked #1 in Denver is a big area. That's no small feat. So tell us more kind of currently like about your team, you handle your operations and kind of how that message you were just sharing, how are you instilling that in your team members?
Totally. So we are I say small but mighty. So I only have a team of 6. So I have an amazing ops manager. Our office admin is amazing. They keep the day-to-day rolling just as smooth as possible, right? And they take care of all of the questions customers come in, answering calls, handling the logistics of scheduling. And then I have 4 amazing technicians, ranging from, 2 master techs that can do pretty much anything residential and commercial, and then 2, journeymen, right on the entry level of journeyman, but kind of still apprentice. But the biggest thing is finding people with strong character. And so because we can teach people how to work on a garage door, it's hard to, I don't know if you can teach character. I think that's built into us. And so we kind of have to sort through the weeds to find the right people for us. And so because we're small, we also have to make sure that our technicians can be efficient with our customers and their time, but also create substantial value by understanding their needs and their wants. And so one thing I think that differentiates us from others is really when we arrive, we're not ever trying to sell anybody anything, because we know that's what everyone else is already trying to do. And so the likelihood of us being the only one going to be at their home is pretty rare. And so when we go, we're just anticipating getting the second visit. If we can help our customer on site, we're absolutely going to do that. And most of the time we earn their trust within the first visit. But that comes with just being genuine, addressing their needs and their wants, answering all of their questions, being a good listener, and then educating them on our value we provide, whether it's on a product or a warranty, but being educational. People always ask, hey, what's your sales technique? And I said, we don't have a sales technique. We have an educational based training technique. So if we can out educate our customers on our industry and our business and our product, most of the time we will win our customer.
Yeah. No, I love that. I feel like that's what I try to do with the people that I work as well, because in healthcare, there's so much misinformation out there. And garage doors, there's I don't know anything about my garage door. I just expect that the garage door is going to come and fix it once it breaks. And so it's definitely that education is so key. Only a big part of service is educating as well. So, all right. So let's switch gears a little bit. We got a kind of a pretty good picture of your entrepreneur journey. I love your message of serving. That's coming, definitely coming through in everything you're doing. So let's talk about, the other side of entrepreneurship is, we only work however many hours a week. I know as entrepreneurs, we like to work 80 hours a week and push hard, and especially as we're growing business. But that often leaves our family, our wife, our kids, other things or our health without as much attention. And so I know you have an interesting story that you want to share there. So how, you shared your entrepreneur journey. So how does that fit in there, and some challenges that came up in your family life, and how that fits in, and how you handled that or not handled that well, and then where we're going now. So.
Yeah. No, I love sharing the story. People that are really close to me think I'm crazy, because when I share, they're like, are you going to share all of it? And I'm like, well, yeah, because I do feel like when we're ultimately vulnerable on the highest level, we can grow, first of all, personally. There's like an inevitable amount of growth that can happen. You can accomplish anything within your personal growth. And so my journey of entrepreneurship integrated into my marriage and my relationships, I was a massive failure. And I was just talking about this morning. People were talking about how they're afraid of failing. And I said, actually, I actually look forward to failing, because I feel like failure is the first step to success. And I believe that. I think that might sound crazy, but when I started my business, when I was 22 years old, I was immature, young. I didn't go to college. I just was good with people, and I knew how to work on garage doors. That's really what it came down to. Shortly after I started the company, I met my wife, and, I met her, I saw her walk into the space where I was, and it was love at first sight. It kind of sounds, cliche, but it really was. My best friend was with me, and I was like, I'm going to marry that girl. And he was like, yeah, right. Whatever. And, lo and behold, we've been together for 18 years now. And so when I first started the business and then integrated a relationship into it, it was really challenging. The dynamic of taking care of myself with the company changed to, oh my gosh, I need to show this person and their family and their friends that I can be successful. And I think that the motivator to grow was always in me. But when I fell in love with my wife, I knew that I needed to prove on a higher level that I could be successful. And so that created challenges, because then I became, over time, early on in our marriage, I became kind of obsessed with the business, because I felt like by seeing other people that were in air quotes successful, that I had to work all the time, that I had to grind all the time, that if I wasn't working, that I was a failure or I wasn't going to be a good provider. And so I was working 100+ hours a week, and in the moment had no idea how much I was neglecting my relationship with my wife. Because when you're young, I feel like that's just what we feel we have to do, is until I'm successful, which who lays out the ultimate, what's the rule on success, right? And when you're young, for me, I thought it was all financial, right? Like I had to make a bunch of money. And, so as we went through our life and I was grinding, my wife was very supportive of that. I didn't know the damage that was happening because I wasn't present. I worked all the time, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We were open, available. I was available. And then as we got further in our relationship and we were talking about starting a family, that dynamic was stressful, but I was excited. And so, at that point, that was a few years into our relationship. My father-in-law had unfortunately passed away. So that was a huge "you're married" moment. I remember getting a phone call and it was like, "Hey, Steve passed away. You need to tell Sam." And that was the first time I was like, "Wow, I'm married. Like
Right.
this is a big deal." That setback with my wife emotionally was huge, but I didn't take the time to understand that. I was obsessed with work. I was grinding. I was not there for her how she needed to be. So then we continued moving forward, continued talking about starting a family, started trying to start a family, and we couldn't. And we were like, what is happening? Everyone around us was getting pregnant and everything was great. And in our space, it was just hard. And we were like, why is this struggle so hard? And eventually we got to a point where we medically just knew we couldn't have a child. And so we started looking into adoption, got educated on adoption, and we invested in that route. And I'll never forget this day. We were just talking about it. My wife called me. I was working on a garage door in Aurora. I'll never forget the house. And she goes, "Trapper," she goes, "I'm pregnant." And I was like, "What?" I left that house. I left all my stuff there, explained to the customer, "Hey, I'm going to go. I have an emergency. I got to get to." I met my wife at a hospital because the thing was we needed to get her on certain supplements and things. If she got pregnant, then she needed help because of different things. And so we get there, I get there, she's already in the room. She's upset. And she was like, "Hey, we lost the baby." And I was like, "Oh my God." And so this huge high of the day became this low. And you can't make these kind of stories up. That's why they're so great. Within 10 minutes, we're sitting in the hospital. I had her mom on the phone talking to her about how Sam had a miscarriage. And the adoption agency called us and said, "You are matched with your child's mother." And so I'm going to get emotional, but it was within 10 minutes. It was the most amazing, just meant to be moment. Right. And so I remember us leaving the hospital, going down to Creative Adoptions was the agency we were working with, and our profile book had been chosen. And so we had an opportunity to meet with the biological mother. She was amazing, 15 years old when she got pregnant with our daughter, Jaden. And we met her in her second trimester. So we got to go through that journey with her. And then that again, with the entrepreneurial part of it, created more pressure for me. I said, okay, I have a child now, and I'm married, I have a child. And so it was kind of like, now I need to be more involved. I need to be more successful. I need to create a lifestyle for these women in my life, right? So then I just dove into work even harder and started to grow the business and scale the business. And, in 2015, I had almost 20 employees. And so that was the worst year of my life. At that point, we had so many people. We did not have the right management. I was not a leader. Life was just falling apart. And so I would come home and I was miserable. It just wasn't a great space.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question about that? And so,
Absolutely.
but revenue-wise, was 2015 one of your highest revenue years?
We had great revenue and the worst profit.
Yep.
I read an article during that year. I knew I wasn't running a good business. We were providing great service and value to our customers. We were losing money at a massive rate, although our revenue was up. So that was even more stressful. And I remember my wife, it was a Saturday morning, and my daughter, 3 years old, laying in our bed. And there was a conversation. It was like 5:30 in the morning. I still get up around 5:30 in the morning, but have a completely different routine now. But in 2015, I rolled out of bed, I was getting ready to go to work, and my little girl looked at my wife and kind of had a conversation of like, why does daddy have to work and we don't on the weekends? And that like made me cry. That entire day, I just felt miserable. It was Saturday. I was the only one working. It's not like I had a team working. I was the only one out and about. And I got home, and my wife was still thinking about what that conversation was. And she goes, Trap, she goes, I think some things need to change. You're not here. Like, this isn't what I signed up for. Jaden clearly is seeing that you're not around. And when you are around, you're not her dad. You're just a person. And so it was a big talk. And so I started researching and asking for help in the business space and coaching. And I found a program called Tap the Potential with Dr. Sabrina Starling, and she's amazing. And I signed up for that program right away. It was a small entrepreneurial group. It was expensive, but it was a tool that I was going to invest in, and it was going to hopefully save my family, right? And so I dove right into it, and it was hard. My first call with Sabrina, once I was onboarded, was like, hey, you're going to change from a 24-hour, 7-day a week to an 8 to 5, no emergency service, no weekends. And I was like, I can't do that. And she goes, why not? And I said, I'm going to lose a lot of customers. I'm going to lose money. And she goes, well, you're losing money already. So we need to find a way to create more value and cost less money. And you're paying people to do jobs that are unproductive. And so she ended up helping me do a report based off of my tech's efficiency. And I read a report with her in that program about warm bodies. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that term. But that weekend, it was Friday, I read that article with her, and she goes, through the weekend, you need to find out who your warm bodies are. And on Monday, you need to let them go. And I said, okay. And I had to commit to this because I needed to commit to it. This woman knew what she was doing. This was her profession. I have a business that's creating failure in my life. And so I was just turning my life over to her, like, help me. And so on Monday, I had 15 technicians at that time, and I let 8 of them go on Monday morning. And that was scary because we had work for 25 guys. So at about 1 o'clock that day, I called her and I said, hey, I just let half my service team go. And she was great. She goes, that's awesome. She goes, now we're going to increase your rates and we're going to create more value within your business. And I said, oh my God, I can't do that. It was just, I argued with her every step of the way. We were doing like $79, I think was back in the day, it was like $79 service call. And she goes, we're going to bump that up to $159. And I go, that's more than anybody in town. She goes, yep. She goes, I've already done some research and that's what we're going to do. And her and I spent the next couple of weeks creating a value package. Like, how are we going to show our customers we're worth twice as much? And surprisingly, not to her, but to me, we just started being really efficient. We started making money. I sold 8 trucks. That decreased our debt. We started making more money per job, providing options to our customers, just learning how to have a business, right? I mean, it'd been a long time that I'd been in business, but I didn't know anything about business. And then my personal life was getting better. I was spending time with my family after work and I was present. And so I felt like everything was going really good because I'd made these changes. And then this is where, you think things are great because you're in the space and everyone around you sees the success and your friends see how good life looks for you. And, we had a nice home and cars and all this, the stuff. Right. And then one day, my wife was just kind of being odd. It was October of 2016, I think it is what it was. And I was never one of those guys to be like, hey, who are you texting? I was always pretty secure. I was a pretty confident guy. And I love my wife, and I always felt like she was confident in me and she loved me too. And I remember she left her phone on the counter or something, and she was being kind of odd, and she'd been drinking. We were at some friends. And so I opened up her phone, and she was texting some guy. And that really hurt because I had been doing so much to create this life for us. And it was, the more I read, the more it made me sad more than anything. I wasn't really angry. I just was kind of sad. Like, this person that is my life partner isn't really that excited to be my life partner. Like, there was just things in there that I read, and it was crushing. And so I remember addressing her about it, and it turned into, like a big thing. And we got back to Denver. I went and saw my therapist. Her name's Tamara Hughes. She's awesome. She's been my therapist for like 18 years. So I love that woman. She's amazing. She's helped my family so much. And so I went and saw her, and she goes, Trapper, something that I think you need to work on is understanding empathy and seeing, like, how do you feel you were a part of this, this problem that has come up? What part did you play in this? And that was challenging to, like, see, because I was just kind of like, man, my wife is doing this stuff, and now I have to look and see what I did. Like, I've been grinding, I've been working, I've been sacrificing. It was all about me, super selfish. And when I took a moment to reflect and go, man, we've been married for 8 years, and I am probably the person she sees the least. And when we do see one another, we don't have high level conversations. It was just very basic stuff. How was your day? It sucked. It wasn't positive. It was always negative. And she worked also. It wasn't like she was a stay-at-home mom. She was a career woman too. But I never asked how her day was. And it wasn't that I didn't care. I just was so obsessed with making sure that I wasn't failing as a man, as a husband, etc. And little did I know, like, everything I was doing was just at a detriment to my family. And so her and I got some help. We did couples therapy. And then I dove into really understanding what some of my bigger challenges were with success, and like, why am I hyper focused on being financially successful? And so her and I spoke. We kind of made a list of, like, a wish list of, hey, what do I need to do to help you? What do I need to do to be here more supportive for you? How can I be a more present human being in our life? And she kind of wrote out this laundry list of things, and it was all fair. And my one thing was, hey, can you just stop talking to this dude? Can you just focus on, like, if you need to talk to someone, talk to me. If you need somebody to confide in me. So I felt like we'd moved on from that, right? And so going into 2017, 18, everything was going well, right? And seemingly life was good. I was definitely being more intentional with my time. I was definitely becoming a better dad, a better husband. And I just felt like we were just kind of starting to find a groove. Until another day happened where Sam's phone was on the counter, phone rang, and I'm her husband. So we used to just we would pick each other's phones up all the time. And it wasn't like a weird thing. And I picked the phone up, and it was just strange because it had a name come across the screen that was just odd. And I had an idea of what it was, and I picked it up, and I was like, this is Trapper. And it was the guy. And I was like, WTF. And now I'm mad. Now I'm mad because I've invested in a lot of character change, a lot of character development. I've invested in our life. I've invested in my family, in my marriage. And that one hurt a lot because I was like, man, I did so much to change who I am. Why isn't this working? Like, why didn't this solve the problem? And so then I, right away, I confront Samantha, and we have a conversation, and she kind of just admitted, like, I'm just not happy. And she's like, it's nothing to do with you. Like, you've done so many things right I thought all of those things that you changed and the character development you've gone through would have made me better. And in the moment I recognized this isn't about me. like I can't control or make things better for any other human being. My wife is struggling. Like there's things she needs to work on. And people around us, even my therapist, were like, you should leave. Your marriage, if your spouse has stepped out of bounds 2 times within a couple years, there's clearly a lack of respect. I have an extremely significant love for this woman. I don't give up on things either. I feel like if you're vulnerable, you communicate, you can get through anything as long as the other person can find a way to do so. I've always believed that. So at a cost of myself, I was like, hey, like, what can I do to support you and what you need to get support in, right? And so Samantha started diving into like her character because it's something she never did. But I also never understood what challenges she had growing up. I was always really open. I mean, I shared about the trauma I had as a kid, you know, the trauma I had as a teenager, the trauma. I always shared all my trauma because I always felt that was the most healthy way to deal with it. If it's out there, then it's not a secret. It's not something I have to hide. But I never recognized with Samantha, she was the opposite. She stored everything internally. She never felt comfortable talking about anything. And so she started talking more about it with me, but also seeing somebody, which was a huge deal because I said, okay, well now Samantha's investing into her character, into her past. You know, we have to uncover things for ourselves. And I believe with anything in our life, we as the individual that has a problem, no matter what the problem is, we have to want it to be better in order for it to get better, right? And I was really proud of her in that moment to identify that she had issues, because I think that's the first step with any problem. So she started working on that, and seemingly things were getting better, right? And I would say that we were kind of hitting a really strong stride come like 2020, midway through 21. And then everything changed with everybody in every country in the world. And COVID just kind of said, we're going to fuck everything up. And my wife lost an amazing job that she loved. It was a nonprofit in a space she was passionate about, and it ruined her. And I owned a company that had federal contracts that became what was the word they called it? We were an industry that was necessary. I forget but we had a letter from the government saying, hey, you're allowed to continue operating your business. And so we had federal contracts for the commercial side of garage door work for the largest power companies in the state. So we had to continue working. And so then I was working all the time again because I had 2 technicians that didn't feel comfortable working during that time. And that's fine. We respected everybody's, if that's how they felt safe, we respected that. So then I was working a lot again, and Sam was at home and all day and alone with her thoughts. And and at this point we'd recognize that she struggled with confidence, self-esteem, depression, a lot of things we knew. Yeah. And then when you're alone with your thoughts all day, every day, it's hard, right? And so I remember one day, midway through 21, probably July, August, I came home and I got home at an unexpected time, and Samantha was communicating with that guy again. And I was super disappointed because, we got married in 2007, and now it's 2021. And now at this point, I'm thinking I've invested a lot into this relationship that's not creating a very strong ROI because I'm an entrepreneur. And I do believe that our largest investment in life is our time. And I felt like that for a long time. Even though money is important, we just don't know how much time we have, yep. Right? And so I confronted her. I let her mom know because her mom knew what was going on. Like, she was a very significant person in our lives, and she was someone I trusted to talk to as well. And I didn't really get upset that time. I just internally was questioning, I can't do anything to fix this. This is not anything I can control. And then Samantha she was really depressed. And she started sharing like how unhappy she was on a high level. And that kind of hurt. I was like, man, I've just done so much. Yeah. And at this point in my life, I felt like I was a solid dude. I have a strong character. I have a strong work ethic. I have a really successful business. I am an amazing dad, and I'm a great husband. And the transformation from 2015 to 2021, I honestly didn't think I could be a better human being. And so I just felt like I'm the best version of myself I've ever been, and it's not good enough. And then I don't think Sam recognized what that did internally because I chose not to share. And I actually had a plan. I had a trip planned to go fishing with some really great friends, all my best friends up in the mountains up in Colorado here. And so I had a plan no one knew about. And I drove this gigantic F450 truck because I was always that guy. You know, I had that truck and the big camper and all the shit. And I had a massive ego. And I had this great life that everybody thought I had, except the only thing that I really wanted was a strong marriage. Like, that's the only thing I really wanted. And I just have done everything to this point, and it just didn't work. And so internally, no one knew what was going on. Nobody knew what I was going through. And I just wasn't sharing it with anybody. And I went out on the river that day. We got up to the mountains. We went on the river, fished all day, fly fishing. And I remember going through this canyon where there's people that do like cliff diving and like cliff jumping, right? Well, I'm afraid of heights and depths. So it's not something I would generally be like, sign me up for, you know? But I told my buddy Dan that was in charge of our raft, I said, hey, pull over. I said, I'm going to go do that. And my buddy Nate looked at me and he kind of just gave me a look. Like, he's known me for 20 years. And I think they were like, what's going on with Trap, you know? And I knew what was going on with me. So I climbed up to the top of this cliff with all these young people that are out of their minds. And I'm like watching them do it. And I'm like, oh, I can do this, you know? And if it didn't work out, I already knew what my plan was. So it didn't matter really. And so I jumped, and it was so freeing. It was scary, but I wasn't even scared just because my headspace where I was at. And I went underwater, and I just remember closing my eyes and coming back up and just being at peace. It was really weird. It was a strange feeling. And then I got back in the boat, and my buddies were like, oh, we got on video, and that was awesome. And we finished our day on the river, got back to camp, and I told them, I said, hey, I'm going to drive up the mountain to go call Jaden and Sam, and because that's the only place that had cell phone reception. And so I drive about 45 minutes up the mountain. It's dark, and I get to this field where there's cell phone reception, and there's like 25 other trucks up there. You know, it's like where you go to get cell phone reception. So I call to talk to Jaden. I really had no intention to talk to Sam. I wasn't invested in that anymore, fairly well given up. And Jaden answered the phone, and I was like, hey, Stink, you know, how was your day? And it was a very normal conversation with my daughter. And that's what I wanted it to be. Just a normal conversation. And she was like, did you have a good day on the river? And I said, yeah. And I cliff jumped. I'll have to show you this video. And I said, and she was like, hey, do you want to talk to mom? And I said, no. I said, just tell her I said I love her. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. And we hung up. And I knew that I wasn't going to talk to her tomorrow, but I just didn't want that to be something she knew. And so I got in my truck, and my plan was, it was a couple 1,000-foot drop from the top of this mountain to the bottom of the canyon. And there's a pretty significant S curve that if you were to miss it, you would just sail off the side of the mountain. And so I had all my insurance and everything, I had all my ducks in a row. And if an accident happened, my wife and my daughter would be taken care of financially. And people ask if I was scared or what was in my mind. And I tell them, I said, no, I think that's the first time in my life I actually ever cared about what I felt. And so I got up to about 140 miles an hour in that truck. And headlights were on and just, I could see the guardrail getting closer and closer. And my daughter, there's no cell phone reception here. And so this was just meant to be. I believe that. I'm flying down this road, and across my navigation system in my big truck, it says Stinky Bean, and it's ringing, and it's my daughter's cell phone. And I was a couple 100 feet. It's not like it was a cliffhanger. I didn't hit the railing, but I smashed on the brakes and I answered the phone. And my daughter goes, "Dad, you didn't sound like yourself. I want you to come home tonight." And I said, okay. I said, I'm going to go let the guys know and I'm going to come home. So I drove down the mountain and I told them that Jaden needed me home. And it was about a 3.5 hour drive. And I left my camper and I drove home. And I got home. It was around midnight. Jaden was still up. She gave me a big hug. And, she was worried about, she'd seen Sam and I's relationship the last couple of years. And we always tried to be decent about how he handled it. But she's, kids are intuitive and she understood things weren't great. She gave me a big hug and I was like, "Hey, I need to talk to Mom." And Sam came out front on our porch and I said, "I was going to kill myself tonight." And she wasn't like super emotional. And I don't know if that hurt my feelings or not in the moment, but it didn't matter because in the moment when my daughter called, I recognized that I had never known who I am as a human being. I was 38 years old. And I never knew my purpose. I never knew what I was here for. But in the moment, I recognized that I wanted to learn. And I wanted to figure out who I am. And I wanted to invest in who can I be? Who do I want to be? I knew I wanted to be the best dad that I could be on the planet. I wanted to be the best husband I could be if I could be that. And I knew that I wanted to discover what I'm meant to do here. And so got a hold of my therapist, went in there right away the next day, and we laid out a plan. And it didn't involve Sam. It involved me. It was what do we need to do to overcome my challenges? What do we need to overcome and figure out what plan do we need to put in place so that I could be successful as a human being, so that I could understand what I was meant to do here. And so, that was late 21, and Sam and I, we kind of became very roommate-ish. We lived in the same house and we still stayed in the same room, but we were definitely not in a relationship at that point. I was focused on taking care of myself, and Sam, surprisingly enough, after a couple months of removed from the situation, she started to become someone who started taking care of herself. And I think she was starting to figure out that I was at a place where I was just going to focus on being the best version of myself for me and not for anybody else. And I was so focused on being the best version of myself for her. So I think that she recognized that change. So she started focusing on how to become the best version for her instead of for everybody else. That was something she struggled with. And so going into early 22, over Christmas break and into New Year's of 21, Sam and I started talking about how we wanted to try to start dating again, like each other. Like I love this woman, right? And I said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to focus on myself, and I know what's going to make me happy, and I'm going to respect myself because I haven't in the past." And I said, "And if you want to try, I want to try too, and I want to start over. And I want to be the best version of me, and if you can fall in love with that guy, great. If not, we'll know where we're at and we can move forward." And so we started redating in February of 22, which was awesome. I remember we went on a family trip to Scottsdale. It's our favorite place to visit in the States. And we went down and we stayed at Hotel Valley Ho, which is amazing. We love it there. And we had our daughter with us and we just had a blast early February. And then we got home from that trip and we had such a great connection. We didn't talk about any of our past. We just talked about our future. And I don't ever recall Sam and I talking about our goals as a couple ever. I mean, I just don't think we ever did. And that was the first time. And so we got home and we share a same birthday, February 16th. Sam was born in 79. I was born in 83. And so we were like, "Hey, we want to go back, but we want to go just back as a couple." So 2 weeks later, we flew back down and it was just Sam and I. And we just had like the most amazing trip. fully reconnected, like in every imaginable way. I mean, I knew who I was on the way of becoming. I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I knew how I wanted to serve others and serve myself. I knew the dad I wanted to be. I knew the husband I wanted to be. If Sam wanted to be a part of it, great. And I think we were kind of just getting to a place where we were committing to one another again. And that was really cool. And so we came back from that trip full of energy and like kind of just a new appreciation for one another. And that was just magical, to be honest. And we started talking about buying a second home in Phoenix. And we scheduled a trip out there April 25th. And we were going to take Jaden with us. And so we had something to look forward to. We never used to plan stuff like that. And so we had all this positive energy to like look forward to. And so we were just, we'd go on dates every, Friday, Saturday and leading up to it. And we had some friends down the weekend of, I think it was like April 12th. And we went to a Broadway show because we used to love doing that. And we went to that show with my best friend, Seth, and his wife, Stacy. And it was the best weekend. And we were just stacking wins. I mean, we were just becoming the couple I think we were meant to be. And it was really cool. And April 16th, we headed downtown to go to Jersey Boys at the Denver Center of Performing Arts. And we went to Ocean Prime, a nice restaurant. And we were with two other couples and we were just having a blast. And like, we just were so invested in this new future. And Samantha leaned over at dinner and kind of like grabbed her head and was like, ow, like vocally said, ow. And I was like, baby, all right? And she's like, I need to go to the bathroom. I just don't feel good. And I was like, all right. So she goes to the restroom and probably 5 or 6 minutes passed. And I was talking with my friend Brad and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go check on Sam. Like, I don't know. She just wasn't being herself. And I go knock on the ladies' room door and no one answered the door. So I just opened it. And my wife was standing against a stall, kind of just like swaying front to back, sweating profusely. And she had thrown up. And I said, hey, babe, I said, are you all right? And she looked up and she goes, who are you? And I felt like I thought she was dying. I don't know why that sense came over me. I ran out to Brad. We took his car. I said, I need your car keys right away. I need to help get Sam in the car. I think something's really wrong with her. Something happened. And so he helped me get her in the car. She kept going in and out of consciousness. She was walking with me. We were supporting her, but then she would just kind of go out of consciousness. And I called a friend of mine that I knew worked up at this hospital by our house. And we were in downtown, so it's usually about a 25-minute drive. And I said, I think Sam is dying. Something significant. She can't remember who she is. She can't get words out. She's coming and going. And they said, it sounds like she's bleeding internally. Like this person's a doctor that I know. And he said, if you can get here as fast as you can, I'll have somebody at the front door ready. And I said, okay. So I got in his Toyota Highlander and I got from that restaurant to St. Anthony's North in 11 minutes. I was absolutely flying. I was being safe, but my priority was just to get her help. We got to St. Anthony's. There was medical people waiting for us. Got her inside. They did a very, very quick CAT scan, MRI, and they came out and they said, your wife has internal bleeding in her brain and we have to get her to St. Anthony's Central. She needs surgery right now. And in that moment, nothing else mattered in my entire world other than her being alive. The minutes of walking to the helicopter, a doctor walked me to the helicopter. She was getting loaded up and she saw me and she was going in and out. And I said, I love you. And she looked at me and she said, I love you too. And I thought that was the last time I was going to talk to her. They flew her to St. Anthony's Central. It took me about 30 minutes to get there. A friend of mine gave me a ride. And by the time I got there, they were prepping her for surgery. And the doctor and neurologist came out and they said, Samantha has a ruptured brain aneurysm and she's bleeding to death in her head. And all of the years of like the nonsense challenges we dealt with, adultery, not being able to get pregnant, family deaths, trauma, none of it mattered. All that mattered was my daughter's mom to live and my wife to just live. Like that's all that it came down to, a very human thing. Like I just wanted her to be alive. And so Sam ended up being in ICU for 76 days, which was 5 days short of a record at that hospital. And the individual that was in there for 81 days died. Sam had, I think, 9 brain surgeries. She had a full craniectomy where they take your skull off. She had a stroke. At one point, she had 4 brain bleeds at one time. And on 4 or 5 occasions, the team asked me to have her family fly out here from Seattle. In 76 days, there was 4 or 5 times where they had no idea if she was going to make it. When we got to day 70-ish, it was looking medically like she was going to be medically okay, but significant brain trauma. She couldn't talk. She couldn't walk. She had a stroke, so her left side of her body was paralyzed. And I'd been advocating for a long time because I'm a salesperson at heart. And so I would see this doctor come in every day for 76 days, and he looked really important. So I kept talking to him, building a relationship with him, and his name was Dr. Eric Spear, and he headed the neurology department at Craig Hospital here in Denver. And we're fortunate to have, I think it's the first or second best recovery hospital, rehab hospital in the world. And so for 76 days, I was just talking with Dr. Spear. Hey, you got to get my wife there. I've heard you're the best. I need her to be with you. Like, she's 43 years old. I need her to be back. I need her to be a mom, my wife. And so after a lot of that, we got Sam into Craig Rehab Hospital, and she got in there in July, I think it was, of 22. And it was a relief that we knew she wasn't going to die. She was medically cleared. That wasn't an issue anymore. But now the challenge was, will she relearn how to talk? Will she relearn how to walk? We still didn't know how much cognitive function she had. We didn't know how much she remembered because she had a breathing tube and a feeding tube. She couldn't speak at all. And so that became scary in a different way, because then it was like, okay, well, Sam's alive, which was the objective. But now how much of Sam is alive? And so over the next few months at Craig, she continued to show just her strength and her resilience of getting better. She started to use really small words. The language therapist was amazing. The team there just did absolute miracles with her. And late October, Sam got to come home. She was in a wheelchair. She could barely walk, and she didn't have a very extensive vocabulary. So it was really hard to communicate with her. And Jaden and I were now learning to be her full caregivers, which creates different challenges, because when your spouse is at a hospital, you don't have to be a caregiver fully, and you don't understand what that means. And when Sam came home, we learned what it meant to be a caregiver of your spouse. And I'd gone through some therapy during the visit where they said, hey, Trapper, remove yourself as her spouse. You're going to be her caregiver. You're not going to be her husband for a while. And that was probably the best advice I could get, because Jaden and I, we were her caregivers. We helped her go to the bathroom. We helped clean her, shower her, everything. And that was really hard, because that's when a lot of people will never experience that. And I hope that they can find perspective through these kind of stories to say, wow, I hope I don't ever have to experience that. But if I do, I have perspective to understand how to handle that and be more positive and have gratitude for the things that we do have. And so the months that followed Sam coming home were extremely challenging. Patients were challenged. The relationship wasn't challenged. It was probably the strongest it ever was, to be honest, because I just had taken the husband-wife relationship out of it, and I just wanted Sam to be comfortable. I wanted her to get better. That was our objective. And so thankfully, over the last 2 years being home, she has just done amazing. She now has her driver's license, which doctors said she would never have ever again in her life. And she's had it for about 6 months. She can walk. It's very labored. Her left arm doesn't work very well still, but there is nerve function. So she still does have therapy, which is great. She struggles to communicate still, but her speech has gotten significantly better, to the point where she can she can get things out for the most part, and then she can read just like she used to. She can write again, which is awesome. But she has what's called acute aphasia, and that'll be with her forever. But the doctors say since she's still progressing and getting better, she'll continue to get better for the rest of her life, because there's a place where with neurological brain trauma, if they stop growing and progressing by 18 months, that's where they're going to stop. If they continue progressing after 18 months, their brain is going to continue to recover. And so that's really where we had some hope. Like, man, we might get Sam back almost all the way, but we just don't know how long. But we're very blessed every day that Sam can take our daughter to school. She can pick her up. We go to soccer. We're pretty well a normal family for the most part. And I actually think Sam and I's relationship on an emotional level is the best it's ever been. I think we have a respect and a mutual love for one another that understands that we're both here to help forever. I mean, I just think it's been very solidified. Now, there are significant challenges that come into it when you're trying to recreate the relationship of a husband-wife. And I'm also a very open-minded guy. I'm an open individual, and I would never lie to Samantha. So there's times during these moments where you have to have real conversations with your spouse. That might be for another podcast. But where we are today is, and probably for the last 6 to 8 months, I wake up, and this is something that I'm driven to do for my future, and this is a life purpose I feel I need to share. I wake up every day and I tell myself, I speak it out loud because I've learned that it's so important to have positive self-talk and just to have a positive relationship with yourself. And that might sound strange, but I wake up and I say, I'm ready to have the best day of my life. And I really mean it. And I say that to so many people every day. And they're like, Trapper, you can't have the best day of your life every day. And I tell them, why not? Like, why can't you? I said, because we have it. And I believe to my core, it is my responsibility as a human being to have the best day of my life today. Because if I choose not to, I'm doing a disservice to myself and to everybody that I run into throughout the day. And what I've recognized since I've started doing this is you slowly start to help people change their lives. And that's become my mission is I want to help as many people in the entire world. I want to serve them so that they understand shit can be really ugly. It can be really hard. It can be really tough. It can seem like rock bottom, but it's not. It really isn't. The only way you don't have tomorrow is if you take away today. If we wake up tomorrow, we owe it to ourselves and everybody around us to have the best day we can, and also serve others to have the best day they can have. And so with where I sit today, I'm writing a book. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm on the way to being a life coach, a corporate coach, but I just want to help people be successful in life. And what I've learned through that, the perspective I have, finances are great and they can afford us amazing things. However, I've had nothing and I've had a lot of money. Yeah. And I don't care about any of it in between other than if I have the people in my life that I want to be surrounded with. And ultimately, that's what matters. And I hope I can help people understand perspective. So that's kind of where I sit today. I know that I'm the best husband on the planet. I'm the coolest dad in the world. And those are things that I have no doubt of. So thank you for letting me share. That's kind of like to date. There's a lot in between, but that's kind of my story.
Yeah. Well, and as you know, we met a few weeks ago and we started talking. I was like, there's something special about this Trapper guy and he needs to get his message out there. So you should have warned me on some of these other things. I wasn't quite aware or ready for all the parts of that story. You see, I'm still kind of a little teary-eyed here, but
you can ask me about anything. I am a sharer for sure. And I think that through sharing, we can, through sharing our vulnerability, we allow people to feel comfortable to share their vulnerability.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, and like I told you, like I definitely can feel some of those parts of your story too. I know what it's like to have doctors tell you that your wife might not make it and to have family come and talk to her. That's happened to me multiple times as well in my journey and with my wife and her health history. And so definitely. And I can share more about that in another story because you've definitely inspired me to want to be more vulnerable. And kind of, we could talk about so many of these things for hours and hours, which is why, like I said, we'll have you on again a couple of times, because we haven't even really touched on one of the main reasons we wanted to have this podcast. But I loved what you're talking about vulnerability. And I think sometimes people get confused with vulnerability, thinking that it's going to lead to victimhood. But true vulnerability doesn't. It leads to acknowledging a problem, which you can then address and grow. And I think that's a big part of marriage too. You need to be vulnerable together to find what those problems are so you can address and grow. And you've shown that, and your story highlights that so well. And you've seen the time when she was frustrated and you weren't growing, and then vice versa. And your story kind of showed that so well, back and forth multiple times. And then once you guys got on the same page, it was just magical, right? And then
Yes.
and for whatever reason, I don't understand it all, but the person in charge who does understand it all, he has different challenges for each of us, and different ways that we can kind of show how we've grown. And I do that. I know that is true. And even just in the past couple of weeks, my daughter, she's 11. Her friend was in a car accident, and her friend and her little brother, 11 and 9-year-old. This 11-year-old girl, 9-year-old boy died in this car accident. And so that's been our last 2 weeks. We've been talking with her, working her through that, helping her to acknowledge her grief and to try to help her to be vulnerable. And, I firmly believe people have experiences to be able to help other people with their experiences. Because all of us are dealing with stuff and at different levels. But the one thing that I know is that this life works. From our perspective where we are now, we don't know how that happens, but it does. And there is a long eternal purpose for that. So, but yeah, so we're definitely going to have you on in a few months, because one of the things that we did want to talk about was you've started this journey with your health, with working with us as well. So let's touch on that a little bit. We'll then have you have a progress check-in in a couple months, talk more about vulnerability, more about personal growth, because that is what Superhuman Entrepreneur is all about. And then we'll kind of also then track your progress and you up-leveling your physical health, and energy and focus as you go to change the world. So, all right, so simple questions. So is there something like weighing on your mind that you're like, hey, I want to make sure that we talk about this one little thing?
No, the only thing I wanted to kind of say was, when you and I first talked and we were introduced through a mutual friend, Tommy, I instantly connected with you. And I think that that's important to recognize too, is when we have energies that are I'm an energy guy. And so when you and I first talked, you shared a little bit because I am a sharer, clearly. And you shared a little bit about yourself, and that just meant a lot, because I think that that's what it's about. As human beings, it doesn't matter, in my opinion, it doesn't matter, man, woman, child, we all have emotion, and it is okay to acknowledge it. And if we do that and we open up our vulnerability with others, we can feel those emotions, and we don't have to let them overtake our lives. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is when you and I first started talking, which clearly I reached out to you about, like, my physical form and my nutrition and my health. But what we knew we were going to take away from it was so much more, just because we were meant to have a conversation. And I think that's kind of what's neat about expanding, like, who we speak to and who we talk to. And then you just end up being connected to the people that you're supposed to be connected with, so you can support them. And we don't know how that is when we first meet them, but I just want to tell you that I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your story early on, and then even just touching on it just now, just because I think it's important to acknowledge people when they do share. That's something that's helped me a lot, is early on when I would share my vulnerability, no one would acknowledge it really early on, because I've been this way for a long time. But when people started to acknowledge it, I knew that those were kind of my people, because the people that wouldn't acknowledge that I was acknowledging my vulnerability and my feelings and my emotions, I knew that they didn't support me, right? And I knew that energy wasn't going to be reciprocal. And so I think it helps identify people that are going to be good fits in your life. And so I just wanted to share that, because I feel that way about us.
Thanks. Yeah, I do. We might as well talk about this. We're already over time, so let's just keep going over time, as long as you're good. So yeah, I do. Lots of things there. I feel like us, especially us as men, we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to that because we don't want to show weakness. Because like you're talking about in your early work days, we want to be the provider. We want to be the strong protector of everyone. And sometimes we protect our emotions and we hide them. And I know in my journey through this with my wife, my wife has a chronic kidney disease where they had to actually remove her kidneys. She spent a year on dialysis with no kidneys. And basically I was her caretaker for a year, and I was basically the single dad shuttling my two daughters around everywhere, trying to run the business, running around and wearing myself to bear with nothing there. And I just held everything inside of me, and it just churned. And this is one of the big problems with not sharing and not being vulnerable is when you don't, it just kind of festers inside you, I feel like. And those emotions, they might be sadness, they might be frustration, they might be happy, they might be sad, and if we don't express them, they just turn into this anger or this apathy inside of us. And that's what ends up being communicated. And so I remember after my wife's journey, when she got her kidney transplant and started doing better and better, it was about a year and a half after her kidney transplant. And she's just like, "Why are you so mad?" And I was like, I'm not mad. I'm just going. I just go. And that's when I realized that, I need to figure out, how to express these emotions, how to be vulnerable. And of course, it's a skill that I still need to do better at and better at. But in that process, kind of what I thought about emotions is that, we, especially in business, we can get into a very black and white world. But when we have emotions, that's like the color that
Oh
lets us
man.
live. And so, yeah.
You hit the nail on the head. Just to chime in, first of all, thank you for continuing to share because it's so powerful. And as I was doing my workout this morning, I was wearing my pink watch band, right? And I don't know why this came over me, but you just said exactly how I felt this morning. I was feeling that the world is so black and white, and we have these emotions that are black and white. And people will say, it's black and white, right? Like, where's the gray? And I'm like, where's the color? And you hit it, you just said it. Like, the emotions and the feelings are the color.
Right.
And when we let that out and we're vulnerable, it paints the picture of what's real. And I believe when we can be real, that's when amazing things happen. And so you were in my brain. And so I was like, man, I got to just kind of say something, keep going because it's awesome stuff.
No, I love that. And I'm just looking at that beautiful picture that we were talking about before behind you. We have the black and white chessboard there, but all of us, we're those colorful pieces. We're moving around, and there's a master chess player. There's no coincidences, and your story highlighted that so well. There's no coincidences in this life. Someone knows where those pieces are going, and we know who the winner can be. We just got to put our trust in that. And so, yeah, we can definitely talk about this. And actually, there's a lady that wrote a book that I'm going to try to get on this podcast because I think it's so important, especially for us men, and in the entrepreneur world where we could just get buried in work. But the book is called Running on Empty. And so I can't think of the author right now, but it'll come to me. But that's, kind of you've probably had moments where you felt like you're running on empty. I had moments where I was running on empty, and it's because that connection with those emotions is not there. And we're not, you men listening, you don't have to go be crying, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being honest. And in your story, I loved how you talked about it. You being true with, or trying to figure out who you are, what's your real purpose, not just on the surface, but at a true deep level. What's your true identity of who you are inside, and who are you supposed to be with those people that you love, and the different tiers of people that go beyond that. So, yeah. So how did you? And I know you've worked a lot of times. You've worked with a therapist for a long time, so that's definitely highly recommended to help people do that. But anyway, so if you could fast forward or not fast forward, we're going back. I want to go back the other way. If we could, rewind and go back, and you were there talking to 23, 24-year-old self, newly married, diving in deep to work, because we'll have a lot of entrepreneurs that are doing that same thing now. They're going to be listening to this, and they're going to be, young on their entrepreneur journey. They're going to be doing the 80 hours a week, the 100 hours a week, newly married, or maybe have a new child. So for those young guys that are in that situation, you 15 years ago, me 15 years ago, what advice would you give them?
So I'm working on my first public speaking speech I have a coach helping me because I have no idea how to write it, right? But I want to learn. And so it actually is going to be aimed at high school and colleges. So I'm going to be able to kind of hit that age group. I'm probably like 17 to 25, right? And the thing that I would say is that when you're young, you should experience the most of life, because if you limit yourself, if you're a young entrepreneur, go for it for sure. I am the type of entrepreneur, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, we don't think through a process first. We start the business and then figure it out, right? I mean, and I think that's kind of how life is in general. This is just as a life entrepreneur. So what I would say to my younger self would be, It's great to have that enthusiasm and dive in, because I still do that. However, I try to be more planned in my attack and intentional, because I think when we're young, it's hard to be intentional because we're so excited for the outcome. And so many people that I meet, they're like, man, what an overnight success. And it's like, man, it's like 20 years overnight. And so I would probably give myself the advice of, hey, slow down, appreciate who's in your life right now and learn from them. Talk less, listen more would be a big one for me. But I would also say, I think we end up being who we're supposed to be when we're supposed to be that person. And so I believe that. So I also know that if 41-year-old Trapper, met 22-year-old Trapper, we would not get along. We are different human beings. We believe different things. We feel differently about marriage and love and business and the definition of success and fulfillment. And so I do think it's important I think you have to just live life. What I hope to teach, if I'm able to teach people something, is how to be ready for perspective and just how to educate people that trauma is going to happen. If it hasn't happened already, it's going to. If you can be educated about trauma, you can have a better understanding about perspective. And so something that I work with therapists and psychologists right now, I'm trying to understand the process of how can we teach young people perspective when they haven't experienced trauma. And it's almost impossible to do. But if we can teach them what perspective means, and we can teach them about trauma and educate them about those things, and through life experiences, if we can get across to enough people, young people, that maybe the trauma won't affect them as much as it would have if they didn't have the experience of education. And so whether it's childhood trauma, adolescent trauma, early adulthood, marital, business, whatever the trauma, if we can come to perspective, I think that's like the biggest thing is my younger self, I'd want to help teach them perspective. That was long-winded, but I think ultimately my entire journey is about perspective, right? I mean, literally life can turn around in a matter of a minute. And it just is so important to recognize like how amazing today is, right? I mean, you and I we're having an experience. Like, this is so amazing, right? And I just think if everyone had an opportunity to look at their day through a different lens that they haven't even discovered yet, it could honestly be the best day of everyone's life today, right now. So I would tell my younger self, be aware of perspective and just live every day as if it's the best day of your life, because then you'll be successful.
All right. I love that. So we're going to end there. And we'll pick up our conversation again in a few weeks and again after that. So I know this has been transformational for me. I know I've done lots of reflection. So if you're listening to this, hopefully take these things to heart, because they're definitely important, because it is up to you to live the best day of your life. If you're enjoying the podcast, help us reach more entrepreneurs like you by leaving a review. As a thank you, everyone who leaves a 5-star review will be entered into a drawing for some exciting prizes. We are here to help you more than just listen. Head over to superhumanentrepreneur.com, click on community, and join a powerful network of entrepreneurs that are striving to be their best. Each episode includes action steps, resources, and accountability to help you to implement these ideas and start seeing results.